Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online. Welcome to our live session this morning. This morning we're going to be learning how to make the classic baklava dessert. And there are many variations to this dessert in the Mediterranean. And the dessert is made by layering phyllo dough with some nuts and sugar, and then you're going to bake that and pour a honey mixture over that, or a syrup mixture. And there's just a wide variety of variations, like I said, throughout the Mediterranean. And the baklava that we're going to be making today is typically a Greek baklava, and the syrup is made with honey and sugar and lemon and some cinnamon. But there's so many variations that you can make. And for the nuts, we're going to be using walnuts. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have my melted butter, which we're going to be spreading on our phyllo layers. And for our nut mixture, I've chopped some walnuts. I like to chop my nuts pretty fine, so they're a little coarse but not powdery. And some recipes you'll see more chunky type of nuts, but it's whatever you like. It's really a personal preference. So like I said, I like mine a little finer. I've got a little bit of clove, a little bit of cinnamon, and some sugar. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix this up, and this is going to be one of our layers in the baklava. So please type in any questions that you have, and I will be happy to answer them. Okay, so now that we have our nut mixture ready, we are ready to start layering our baklava. This is a super delicious dessert. It's a little sweet, but it definitely holds up well in the refrigerator and freezes very well. Okay, so I've got my pan that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to butter the bottom so there's no sticking. And then I'm just going to be carefully layering some phyllo dough into the pan. And then I'll also add some layers of my walnut, sugar, clove, and cinnamon mixture. Okay, so I have my layers, which I trimmed so they fit in my pan, and I'm just going to be placing those one at a time. If you have some of these layers that are really stuck together, I wouldn't fight with them. Just go ahead and put two if you need to. So with your phyllo dough, you're going to want to keep that on the original paper. And then after you trim it, or even if you don't need to trim it, if it's going to be sitting at all, you're going to want to cover it with plastic or even a damp towel. This way these layers aren't going to get dry on you. Well, I have a little bit of sticking here. It's been known to happen with phyllo. It's okay. These are some of our bottom layers. You definitely don't want to use a torn layer on the top. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting about 10 layers in here, and then I'm going to be alternating some layers of phyllo with my nut mixture. And sometimes you just never know when you buy this dough, it can get a little stuck together. So like I said, no worries. If you have to do a couple sheets together, that's okay. Not too much butter. You don't want to soak this with butter. You're just putting enough to cover the surface partially. Okay, and just kind of take your time. You're going to have some torn pieces in there. Most likely, no worries about that. So I'm doing my base with 10 sheets, and it's okay if it goes up on the side a little bit. If there's a lot when you're finished, you can always trim it off. Okay, so now we've got some better looking sheets here. And you can kind of push it a little bit, but kind of once it stops, then it stops. Okay, so we're going to be doing a few more layers, then we're going to have a nice base, because once this bakes, we're going to be pouring some syrup over it. And we definitely want to have a good foundation. So when we're making this, it's going to look pretty compact, but no worries. Once it bakes, the phyllo is going to puff up a little bit, and you'll be able to see those nice layers. And definitely let me know if you have any questions. Okay, let's go ahead and put one more layer in here, and then we'll go ahead and put our nut layers. So walnuts are great. Also, pistachios are super nice too. And even pecans and almonds, whatever you like. You can do a variety, or you can just do one. It's just limitless variations on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to sprinkle kind of an even layer. I try not to put too much because you want this to stay together. If you put too many nuts in here, you might have a little separation. So it's a nice layer, kind of covered the whole thing. And then we are going to continue on with our phyllo layering. So our next layers that are going between the nut layers, we're just going to be putting 2 layers, and it's going to have a nice nut foundation in the bottom. So sometimes when you're putting this first layer over your layer of nuts, it can be a little bit loose, so just kind of take your time and dab your butter on. Just a little melted unsalted butter that I'm using. Okay, so we've got 2 nice layers. Then we're going to go ahead and put another layer of our nut mixture. Then we're going to be putting 2 more layers and another layer of nuts. So we've got 3 layers of nuts all together. And then we'll just top off the rest with our phyllo sheets that we have. Okay, so our baklava is coming along nicely, and when we're finished, we are going to be baking this at 350 degrees, and we're going to be baking it for about 50 to 60 minutes. You're going to want to let it get real golden brown because you want this phyllo to be cooked and not doughy at all. And that's going to give it an opportunity to soak up the syrup that we're going to be putting over this. So we've got 2 more layers in here. I'm going to put another layer of butter. I know it's a lot of butter, so it makes it taste so good. Okay, then we're going to put another layer of nuts. And we're just going to go ahead and top this off with the rest of our phyllo. And there is a Lebanese version of this dessert where you would add a little bit of rose water to your syrup, and that's going to give it a really distinct flavor. So keep that in mind, that it's just really limitless with these flavors. It's a nice Mediterranean dessert, been around for a very long time. Its origins are said to be Turkish, and the baklava was made by the Turks using bread, thin bread layers. So that's kind of where it's said that baklava gets its start, but when things get so old, you just never know sometimes. Okay, so we're just going to be putting our layering of our phyllo, our butter between every layer. Not too much, but you need to get enough on there so it sticks. And definitely let us know if you have any questions. And I wanted to mention too, while we're doing this, that we have an April contest going on that we just launched yesterday. So I'm hoping that you all can join in on the contest. This is a contest where you're going to be submitting maybe a favorite recipe that you've made for your family for maybe years. You're going to be sharing it. And then the way the contest works is when you submit your recipe onto the forum, you'll get a raffle ticket. And then for every post that you do in the forum or reply or discussion to another entry, you'll get a raffle ticket. So the limit is 2, so you can get 3 raffle tickets all together, and we'll have some really nice prizes. They're going to be posted soon, so definitely have some fun with the April contest. So I've got my phyllo got a little wrinkled up. Like I said, that's okay. Those are these inner layers, no worried. Even if you have tears and you have to piece these things to get these things together, or let's say that you have some scrap maybe, you can go ahead and use that in your bottom layers, but when you get towards the top, you want to try to use the nicer pieces, especially for the last top layers, because it's just going to look a lot better. So we're just going to continue layering, and then we're going to cut this in the classic diamond shape. So you can cut it right after you make it, and you can also refrigerate this, and the butter's going to firm up a bit, and that's going to help it be a little bit easier to cut. But we're just going to go ahead and cut this today. If it's not really cuttable, then what we'll do is we'll put it in the refrigerator, and I've got one that I made earlier that we can take a look at. Okay, so since I'm working kind of quickly, there's no need for me to keep covering the phyllo and uncovering it, because I would just really never get done. But definitely, if something stops you, make sure that you have a nice layer of butter over your last layer, and cover up your phyllo with some plastic, or ideally a damp towel. Not wet, just a little bit damp, because you don't want to make the phyllo soggy. You just want to keep it moist so it's not going to dry out, because it will crumble like paper. It will dry out completely. That's what's so nice about this dough, the flakiness when it's baked and it starts to dry, but it can dry out on your table on you. So be very mindful of that. So this is coming along nicely. I'm getting a nice foundation. And don't worry, like I said, if this is a little bit low, it's just going to puff up a little bit. You're going to be seeing those layers once this is baked at 350 for 50 to 60 minutes, and let it go until it gets nice and dark brown in color, a nice golden brown. You don't want to see any lightness with this phyllo, because that's just going to stop the syrup from seeping in. So I've got some syrup on the stove here that I started earlier. It's made with some honey, some water, a little bit of lemon juice, some granulated sugar, and some cinnamon stick, and a little bit of lemon, a couple strips of lemon rind. So you're going to boil that for 10 minutes. It's going to thicken the syrup a little bit. And then once the baklava comes out, you're going to pour it right over the baklava and let it seep in for a few hours, or overnight ideally. Okay, so we've got a few more layers here we're going to be putting on, and then our classic dessert is going to be ready to go in the oven. You can make this in a variety of sizes. You can make these very large, or you can kind of make them medium shaped or even small. You can also roll this if you're doing the, you can make this combination of the phyllo dough and the nuts, and you can make it like on your table and not in a pan, and then you can cut it and roll it up too. So that's another version. So definitely explore your baklava. Let me know how you're doing. I'd love to know what you're doing with these and the different flavors, textures, shapes, and sizes that you're making. It's really really limitless. Also, if you put a little bit of orange in your syrup, that's really nice too. So definitely let me know. I'm really curious to know how the baklava is going. Okay, so it's coming along. Like I said, it doesn't look too high. It looks a little shallow, but it's going to puff up a little bit. We'll be ready to cut this in a minute, and then I have one that I finished earlier, and we'll pour some syrup over it and check it out. Okay, like I said, if you've got a lot of excess coming up the side of the pan, you're going to want to trim it off. So I'm kind of getting near the end here, and it looks like my top pieces are going to be nice. If you're seeing that your top piece is maybe torn, then put a nice piece aside just so you get something nice for the top of this, okay? So we're getting ready to do our very last layer. Looks like I got two stuck together here, but that's okay. And it came nicely off the packaging that this came in. And then we're going to do our final butter layer on top. And then we're going to cut our baklava. And if it's a little too hard to cut, you can go ahead and refrigerate it until it firms up a little bit so you can cut it a little easier. I'm going to set our butter aside. Let's go ahead and see if we can cut this or if it's just a little too warm to do that. You're going to want to use a sharp knife. Kind of get the sharpest knife that you have. I don't recommend using a serrated knife for this. It may tear a little bit from going back and forth. So kind of use maybe a straight edge knife. Okay, let's see if we can cut this a little bit carefully. If you find that it's messing up on you, definitely set it aside, and you're going to want to cut all the way to the bottom. This way the syrup can seep through. I kind of start in the middle and then I work my way out to the ends. I feel like I have better luck doing this. So what we'll do is we're just going to do the square, and then we'll cut the classic diamond. And please let me know if you have any questions on anything, and I'd love to hear how you're exploring your baklava. Okay, seems to be cutting okay, but sometimes when you get to the diamond shape, it can be a little hard, but we'll just keep trimming. You'll see a big difference if you firm this up in the refrigerator too. Okay, so there we go. So to make our diamond shape, we're just going to be cutting our squares in half on an angle. Seems to be working out just fine. And this can go right in the oven. It doesn't need to rest at all. 350 for 50 to 60 minutes. Get it nice and golden brown. And you'll see some of these layers puff up. And you'll be surprised with all the butter in here. It's really not greasy. It just really contributes to the flakiness. Another reason that it's nicer to use smaller pieces of nuts because it's a little easier to cut. Sometimes if you have large pieces, it can get a little messy. Okay, so this cut really well for us. We didn't have to refrigerate it. And it's ready to go in that 350-degree oven for 50 to 60 minutes. Okay, great. Let's set this aside. And I've got one that I made earlier. It's kind of wipe off some of this butter here. Okay, so this is the baklava after it's baked. As you can see, it's a nice deep golden brown color. I've got my syrup that I let boil for about 10 minutes earlier, and I'm just going to be warming this up a little bit, and then we're going to pour this over the baklava. And you're going to want to do this as soon as the baklava comes out of the oven. So it should be nice and warm, and then you're going to pour your warm syrup over this. You're going to let it set for at least a few hours. Ideally, overnight is perfect. That's going to give it a chance to seep in. But if you don't have time, make sure you leave it set for a few hours in the refrigerator, and that's going to help it a lot. This freezes really well. You can probably freeze it for at least a month or so. Just make sure that you wrap it really well. And it also refrigerates really well for about 5 days. So if you're having a party, you can for sure make this about 5 days ahead of time. So we've got our syrup, which is nice and warm. And we're going to go ahead and take our peel and our cinnamon stick out of here. like I said, it's the flavors are just really endless with this. And if you notice that you have any foaming at all, you're going to want to take that off at this time. So you don't have any foaming, so that's good. So the syrup just gets poured over the baklava right in the pan. It's going to give it a nice, nice little place to sit where it can absorb. And this is going to give this a nice shine on top. And please let me know if you have any questions and how exploring baklava is going. Okay, so this is a really nice amount. This is going to set aside in the refrigerator overnight, like I said, ideally. And I have some baklava that I finished off, let it sit overnight, and I have a few here. So you can see the layering and how much this is actually puffed up. It looked a little smaller in the pan when we were first putting it together, but the layers just really opened up with the butter and all the steam when it was cooking. I poured the syrup over it, let it set overnight, and now we have the perfect classic baklava dessert. So thanks for joining me today. I look forward to hearing from you. Have lots of fun with the April contest, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.